This right here is the most powerful Class 1 electric mountain bike currently on the market. I've been riding this thing for a good 6 months now, so I want to do a little bit of a wrap-up review of what it's like to ride such a powerful e-beast. This right here is the Rocky Mountain Instinct Powerplay. The bike features 29-inch wheels front and rear. It's 150 millimeters of travel up front, 140 millimeters of travel in back. The motor has 108 Newton meters of torque, and it's not the motors you're familiar with. Very commonly, you're gonna see Shimano or Bosch systems. There's a few other ones as well. But Rocky Mountain has actually created their own drive system under the Dyname brand. I want to give a huge thanks to my friends over at Jensen USA. They made this whole video possible. Thank you, Jensen. Jensen's an online retailer here in the United States of America, and they're a dealer for Rocky Mountain bikes. They have a whole bunch of Powerplay models currently in stock, and I'm going to link to Rocky Mountain Powerplay bikes at Jensen and at the top of the YouTube description just below this. Anything you purchase from that link over at Jensen will also directly help support my channel. And I'm also supported by P&W Components and Industry 9. So what do we do with the Powerplay? What do we find out about this thing? Well, first I took this thing up to some trails in British Columbia. I hadn't yet ridden. In Canada, at least in BC, you can ride e-bikes on almost all kinds of trails. So that makes it much easier if I want to get some shots on a trail where it's kosher to ride such an e-bike. One of the overwhelming themes of testing this bike was comparing it to some other e-bikes I've had on the channel recently as well. I actually did a whole video comparing this to the Orbea Rise because they're completely different interpretations of the electric mountain bike category. Right away, I'll say this, the Instinct with its bigger power, slacker geometry, more aggressive feel is more of an e-bike. You grab this thing to go do something that's not necessarily the same as mountain biking. You're gonna ride gnarlier trails, especially on the climbs, and you can get away with a lot more in the rough than you would on the smaller bikes like the Rise.
The Rocky Mountain just overall feels like a burlier bike. I think if you're buying an e-bike to like go e-biking, like the Rocky Mountain is a great one. It really pushes you to like try hard and like try really difficult climbs.
Flip side, if you're riding more traditional mountain biking trails, a smaller bike like the Rise is easier to jump, easier to handle, and that's closer to a regular mountain bike feel. Bringing it back to the Instinct, it's a pretty short back end with 2 positions for adjustability. I kept it in the short one. I like a short back end. I like a nimble bike. If you watch the video, you see why I like a smaller bike, a smaller back end. I think we'll do this as a whole separate video, but we tried all 4 positions. So you got 2 settings for geometry, 2 settings for suspension. It's called the Ride 4 setting. The way the Ride 4 works, you can adjust it fore and aft 2 positions. Forward steepens, rearward slackens, and then you can adjust it top to bottom 2 positions. Higher up makes it a little bit less progressive, and further down makes it more progressive. This piece of aluminum here is offset, and you can rotate it so that the shock mounts into each of those 4 positions. Progression refers to how hard it is to bottom the bike out on a bigger hit. We tried all 4 of those back to back to back, and I haven't really touched the Ride 4 adjustment system since I got this bike. It's been fine. That said, today would be a great day to try the other 3 positions that I haven't yet experimented with. So we're gonna drop in on this trail here, do a lap with the stock setup that I'm totally used to, and then we'll start adjusting the Ride 4 system into the 3 different positions from where it is now to see how each one handles. All right, Ride 4 is in position number 4, and we're gonna give this a full pull. So being totally transparent, it was not a drastic difference between position 4 and position 3. I did bottom the bike out pretty hard on the bigger hucks. So now I've gone to the Ride 4 position number 2, which is slacker geometry, less progressive suspension. And wow, it's a more noticeable difference than I was expecting. Ew. Oh, nice. Slacker feels better for that. So I came into that steep bit a lot more confidently than the other 2 times. Cool. That rode definitely better than I anticipated. I know I've only ridden 3 of the 4 Ride 4 positions, but it already seems that the suspension change is nowhere near as noticeable as the geometry change. On this last run, we'll drop down to the Ride 4 position number 1, which is the slackest, most progressive, most bike park style of setting. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3, 4, sort of. Don't drop anything on the ground. Oh, that first jump felt quite a bit safer that time than it did previous. Cool, this test was worthwhile. That was definitely worth it. It climbs better now too, because it can hold more momentum over the ledges and rocks. The practice of deliberately testing bike parts and doing a same lap over and over with small, subtle changes, it teaches you a lot. In this case, I had a surprise. So I did like the slacker geometry. I like having it in the more progressive suspension setting, and I was surprised to see that the amount of progression change with the upper versus lower holes, it's not a whole lot. It's like going up maybe to 1 size larger volume reducer. The geometry change is quite noticeable, and the thing that I wasn't expecting is that on the climb back up, this thing climbed quite a bit better in the slacker setting. E-bikes like this are all about maintaining momentum, and as long as you have momentum, you can keep that motor going, keep your pedals going, and that keeps the torque going out through the motor, and that helps your traction. So having a slacker head angle meant I could roll over more things without getting bobbled, and then I could keep spinning my pedals around. So yeah, it's noticeably climbing better on the technical bits with the slacker geometry. And I wasn't expecting that to be the case at all. So that's a pleasant surprise for the day. With that, I think we need to hop on a ferry. So let's skedaddle, everyone. One of my favorite things about mountain biking is the experience of getting yourself through the forest on 2 wheels, enjoying nature, but also carrying a little bit of speed, having a little bit of fun, and solving the riddle of how to get through certain sections of trail. One of the coolest things about riding an eMTB is it opens up a whole new world of going up crazy technical climbs. You can do multiple laps on the same trail over and over pretty quickly and dial in your own riding technique. And because the bike is heavier, it requires a different technique than a more lighter weight, regular traditional bicycle. I learn from all of that, and it's super fun. So this has been an absolute hoot for that. I still prefer riding a regular pedal bike over a heavy-duty eMTB, but this is such a different experience that I can validate the extra expense of adding an eMTB to the quiver. I'm the type of person that would never have only an eMTB. I'd always want to have at least 2 bikes. Even if one is a traditional hardtail and then we got a full squish eMTB, that would be awesome. And I would make that kind of a compromise so that I could have an eMTB on hand as well as a regular pedal bike. Both are cool, they're so different. It's kind of why I like having a hardtail in the first place. It's so different than the full suspension bike. It keeps it fresh. But unfortunately, I started to see some error codes up on the Jumbotron. Now, making media about bikes like these, oftentimes companies get me pre-production samples, and this bike was indeed a pre-production bike. I don't know what exactly went sideways with the motor, but I started to get all these error codes. I got a few overheating messages as well, and the overheating became more and more frequent, so I contacted Rocky and they said, you know what, let's just get a production motor and controller in there and get you back up to regular spec. Andreas Hessler, head of marketing.
No, God, I'm head of giving you guys bikes, that's about it. Part of the marketing department.
And you run the BC bike race.
That, guilty on that.
That's awesome. Yeah. If I was more of a cross-country rider, I would definitely come and do that.
Come to the Megavolt. We also have an e-bike event.
Oh, gosh.
It's just fun. It's a festival for E.
Yeah. I'll just try to keep that out of the shot. Okay. Cool. I don't need much footage. Just like, okay, this is what Rocky Mountain looks like. The actual ride of the production motor versus the pre-production that I was on, it's literally same. If anything, there's a touch more overrun now, which is great because it's much more comparable to Shimano's amount of overrun with their the EP8 system that was on the Rise. That overrun on the steep climbs, when you gotta stop pedaling to get over a rock or something, With the overrun, you keep getting a little bit of push. Without that, you run out of momentum pretty quickly being on such a big bike.
The story of today actually begins a few days ago. Last Friday, I had to pop up here and pick up this year Instinct Power Play from the Rocky Mountain headquarters. They did a little warranty swap-a-rooney on the motor for me. So I wanted to try it out and went ahead and came up here and rode for an entire battery from 94% to 7% right here on the hill on the North Shore. This is the famous North Shore that I definitely grew up seeing this North Shore in magazines all over the place. Holy cow. Amazing dirt conditions. The snow has melted in just a few days. Awesome. First trail we rode is named after like the Adobe applications or something. And it has like a really cool rock roll to begin everything. And there's this fun little jump you can do to pop right into it. And then it gets pretty rooty and wild with some little popper opportunities. And man, that stuff is exactly what this bike was designed for. It has a slack enough head tube angle that I've got some confidence for that. It's got enough suspension that I can send some of those small natural jumps and feel confident. And the traction of that style of suspension, the horse link, oh man, it's good. I just threw a fresh rear tire on this, a Maxxis, a Minion DHR Max Grip DH casing. Perfect tire for here for today. I'm actually blown away at how good this tire is. I wish I would have had this tire last Friday on the other trip. Teeter-totter life.
If this was my personal bike, I would make 3 changes. I would change the fork up to 160 or even 170 travel. I might even just, instead of swapping out the travel, I might just throw a 38 on there to have a little bit more stiffness. I would go to a burlier rear shock, something with a touch more high-speed compression damping. E-bikes are so heavy, you can't do as much in the air to manipulate them and put them where you need to, so you're relying on the bike's suspension a bit more. Furthermore, they make a new forward shock mount to convert this over to the longer travel altitude configuration. So I know this is a little ironic to say, this Instinct was a lot of fun and I really liked it. But if I were gonna buy it, I would probably buy the altitude version. Exact same bike, just different shock, forward shock mount, and fork. That's right, I would buy the bigger version than this because it's just a little bit more capable, be a little bit more fun to be able to get away with a little bit more. I think that would be really, really cool.
As we were hitting some of the faster drop-off sections of trail, I noticed something was feeling a little off. And sure enough, the rear brake rotor had worked its way loose. And that's the second time I've noticed this rotor getting loose on this bike. I'm glad I brought my multi-tool because for the second time while riding this bike, the rotor has gotten super loose. It's not an Ice Tech rotor, just a stamped steel rotor, but out of nowhere, it got loose. And I made sure to tighten those a ton with these special Weehaw T25 big ol' hex keys, or Torx keys. Oh, and that was tight as dickens. You can tell my bolts have seen some loving because I had to use not a Torx wrench on the trail once to tighten these up as well. I think I used my car keys to tighten them. So it's out in the bush. I loosened up. Tossing the Instinct through corners is generally super fun. I like the way Rocky Mountain bikes corner. The way these things handle is right up my alley. You can lean them over, push down and into the bike, pull back, and it just scoots right through the turns. This trail is advocated for by the NSMBA. I'm a member. You guys should be too. I'll link to the NSMBA in the description down below. Thanks, NSMBA. And yeah, it was rad to get back down this trail. It's changed significantly in the last 3 or so years. Right as you drop in, there's like this cool spot where you have an option to do a little huckaroony, or you can hit like a North Shore drop. I opted for the huckaroony, which, yeah, I like to get air with this thing. This is a heavy bike. It's 51 pounds. It carries that weight a little bit higher than the Rise because the battery is longer, higher up on the bike. And so while it does pop really nicely, I do feel that weight when I'm trying to get air, but it gets off the ground nicely. Smacking down through some of the natural trail bits, you know, you can bunny hop this thing pretty decent. If you have any kind of like rock or root to use for some help to bump jump with, the thing does great. When you're just flat bunny hopping it, you feel the weight more then. But the suspension design, it's really forgiving. So when you go to pull up, it doesn't suck away all your energy as you're trying to get your bunny hop going. I have it set in the most progressive suspension setting. Nice. Woo! There's a ton of skinnies up here, which I guess technically are also North Shore bridges. And we tried a really skinny one that was too covered in snow to do the other day. And then there's one famous one that's quite long. So Logan and I rigged up this really cool follow shot where he was running behind me with a gimbal on the camera. And the bridge just goes and goes and goes. And that's really what mountain biking in Canada looks like, exactly like that, because we filmed it in Canada. There's a couple of hollowed out logs we got to ride through on this trail, like what they used to build canoes out of, the First Nations folk. And the first one, you know, you ride through, it's really pretty, and it's like, wonder if we could get more high performance through that. Oh, that's scary. All my spidey senses tell me this isn't a good idea. I think that's the move, to pull up early. Yes! In that hollowed out log, there's nails sticking up. So if you've seen the Tom Green video where he falls on a skateboard and slides on a ramp into the nail, yeah, you know, you don't want to fall on that kind of thing. We finished the day off with some of the steepest rock gardens, rock rolls on the shore that are public and sanctioned and legal. We rode these back in 2019, and I remember I started to slide out on this one right above me, and this wasn't rideable. There was like logs and stuff here. And my pelvis wasn't all the way healed yet, so I didn't want to try to hold my bike down and had to let it just slide off. And it looked super disrespectful to have the bike fly off the cliff, but I wasn't gonna risk it and try to like catch the bike. I just needed to take care of myself. But today, pelvis is still intact. So yeah, we've been riding this, and the traction is so much better now that it's raining a lot more. And these, oh man, the Max Grip compound tires, they work really good on the wet stuff. But the geometry of this bike, the way the wheelbase is set up, the shorter back end, but the long wheelbase inspires plenty of confidence on the steep stuff like this. And I'll admit, I can't stop in between each thing. Like, there's not that much traction. I think the best bike in the world wouldn't have perfect traction for that, but you don't really need to stop, because if you get offline, you can't stop if we want. You've got enough everything, geometry and suspension, that it's probably gonna be okay. These trails here, this bike here, 10 out of 10, home run. Rocky Mountain makes some of my absolute favorite bikes. Yeah, and I'm honored and privileged to be here riding this one today. So with that, everyone say thank you to Logan for filming, and pop over to that link I've got in the description below, over to Jensen USA, to all the Rocky Mountain Power Play eMTBs, and yeah, leave me a comment down below, and I'd love to hear how you're doing, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.